What are some government secrets that have been declassified that most people still don't know about? We fucked up the Castle Bravo test. For those who don't know, the Castle Bravo test was the largest nuclear explosion ever produced by the United States. The short and sweet is that we packed the explosive components in with a bunch of benign substance. The benign substance was an isotope of the explosive shit. So the ratio was like %60 of the active element and %40 inactive. We didn't know that if you blast the inactive isotope with enough energy it transforms itself into the active isotope. We made the explosion much bigger than intended and it almost killed the skeleton crew in the observation bunker. We estimated beforehand that the explosion would be somewhere in between 4 MGT and 8 MGT. 8 being the scary big end of the spectrum. It was 15 fucking megatons. Wireless transmission of audible voices into the skulls of human beings. Accomplished decades ago. Glimpses of weapons, based on this technology, have been uploaded and quickly pulled down from military websites. The army calls it V2K4 voice to skull. Also referred to as voice of God weapon. Abu Zubaydah, SP, was waterboarded, 83 times, but that didn't get him talking. What did was a visitation in his cell from Allah who spoke to him and told him his cooperation would make things easier on the other brothers. He was able to withstand the waterboarding for quite some time. And by that I mean probably 35 seconds. And a short time afterwards, in the next day or so, he told his interrogator that Allah had visited him in his cell during the night and told him to cooperate. 18. Eventually it was reported that Abu Zubaydah had been waterboarded at least 83 times. The US caused the death of the world's first commercial satellite, Telstar, only a few months after it was launched. We set off a nuclear blast in space. 5. Actually, and that blast, Starfish Prime, created an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, that killed Telstar, which was placed in orbit the day after the test. The EMP effects energized the Earth's magnetic field long enough to cause the satellite to die on orbit. The Gov didn't tell AT&T what happened until around 2005 or so. Whoops, our bad. Sorry. During which Stalin warned the Japanese that the US was planning on bombing Formosa, practically giving away our plans to invade the Philippines. He didn't want the war to end too soon as it would cut down on the territories he could conquer and claim for the USSR. The US government allowed criminals to buy weapons from gun stores and transport them to Mexico. Also parts to make grenades. These guns have killed, at least, over 200 people, including a US Border Patrol agent. Eric Holder was forced to release over 60,000 pages of documents last night, not getting a lot of attention though, because of the elections. The cat bomb. The US Office of Strategic Services decided that the best way to ensure that their bombs reached the intended naval targets was to strap them to cats and drop the cats from planes with parachutes. It was believed that the cats would naturally avoid the water and direct their payload to enemy decks. The project was declared a failure because no way was found to stop the cats from fainting in mid-air. Edit. Before anyone else decides to inform me, yes, I know about the bat bomb. It's just not as unbelievable as the cat bomb, which is even sort of funny to say. Thanks to Batman, bat bomb doesn't sound nearly as far-fetched. Project MKUltra. During the Cold War, the CIA initiated Project MKUltra, a secret and illegal human research program to investigate potential mind control systems. The program's operators examined the effects of hypnosis, biological agents and drugs, such as LSD and barbiturates, on human subjects. Some historians suggest the program was designed to develop a mind control system that could be used to program the brains of potential assassins. There are a number of secrets from WW2, and after that have been declassified yet few know about. Most involve things like troop movements, etc. It may seem weird to only declassify them decades later, but the fact is military doctrine changes very slowly, and even something as simple as a janitorial supply list can give a good estimate of the number of personnel in an area. After the United States gave immunity to Shiro Ishii, the Japanese Army medical officer responsible for lethal human experimentation and biological warfare projects. He performed so many horrible acts on POWs in Unit 731 just to see what would happen. Seriously, his unit conducted physiological experiments on human subjects, including vivisections, forced abortions, and simulated strokes, heart attacks, frostbite and hypothermia. American scientists decided this information was invaluable, and he was never tried for his crimes. He was given immunity in exchange for his information on chemical and biological warfare. From some flying magazine, the SR-71 was introduced in 1966, at a time in which commercial aircraft were pretty much limited to 25-30 feet altitude, maximum. There was a very junior air traffic controller, bored out of his mind, minding a ATC center somewhere in the heartland. Now, he frequently handled unscheduled changes in altitude. Pilots would call them in, and he'd routinely grant the change. This evening, he gets a call. Northfield ATC, this is Rainbird 27, requesting altitude 50,000. Controller, okay, Rainbird 27, if you can get up to 50k, you can have it. Rainbird 27, roger that, descending to 50k. Thanks and good night. The U.S. Army SL-1 nuclear accident. The SL-1 was a low-power test reactor in Idaho. They shut the reactor down for the holidays. On January 3, 1961, 3 guys went in to power it back up after coming back from vacation. Part of the startup required they reconnect the control rods to the mechanism that raises and lowers them in the pile. To do this, they needed to manually raise the rods a few inches, grab the rod assembly by hand and lift it. For some reason which isn't clear, the reactor operator who was lifting one of the rods suddenly lifted one of them almost 2 feet too far, probably because it was stuck, and he was pulling hard on it, and it broke free. This caused the reactor to immediately go critical and superheat the coolant water, causing a steam explosion and blasting the shield plugs out of the top of the reactor. Also not clear is why the shift supervisor was standing on top of the reactor at the time. He was found impaled by one of the shield plugs in the concrete ceiling of the reactor room. The explosion killed the operator instantly. The third participant survived the blast and was found in the reactor room by rescuers, but later succumbed to his injuries. The reactor melted down. The site was buried and abandoned. What crashed in Roswell was declassified in the early 90s. It was a cluster of balloons being developed to listen for nuclear detonations. There's a layer in the atmosphere where a loud enough sound can actually carry around the world. The project became pointless before it was completed by the invention of satellites. Fun fact about MK Ultra. In the late 50s and early 60s, one of the head professors of psychology at Harvard decided to conduct an experiment on the school's brightest and most talented students. The purpose of the experiment was to observe and document what happens when you stress, bully and overwhelm persons with high IQs. The students were publicly berated, even mocked by various professors participating in the program, and fundamental ideologies were questioned and even attacked. Christians were exposed to logical flaws in the Bible. Atheists were challenged to explain the root of some of the most basic and mysterious components of the universe. Liberals were assaulted as weak and naive. Conservatives attacked for being greedy. Even the students' friends and family were fair game. The program was sponsored and overseen by the CIA and managed by Drive Henry Murray. It began in 1959 and scrapped in 1962. Drive Murray was quite candid about his experiments after they concluded. One of the students who was an unwilling and unaware test subject was, wait for it, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. The United States supported the brutal dictator Pinochet, assassinated Colonel Schneider, and trained in a Chilean intelligence/paramilitary group that committed human rights abuses including disappearances, deaths, and torture. Nixon and Kissinger damaged Chile's economy in order to destabilize the country, creating a coup climate. These files have been declassified, and you can read them all in the Pinochet file. Operation Fast and Furious. The ATF purposely selling guns to cartels to try and trace them to high-ranking cartel members. Yet I believe no arrests came of it, and at least one of the guns was used in the murder of a border patrol agent. I'm really surprised that this one isn't in the list. Nixon committed treason. In the run-up to the '68 election, he engineered it so that the Vietnamese government wouldn't accept the ceasefire that Johnson had negotiated. Even George Will concedes that the proof is incontrovertible. Project Thors. Project Thor is an idea for a weapons system that launches kinetic projectiles from Earth's orbit to damage targets on the ground. Jerry Pournelle originated the concept while working in operations research at Boeing in the 1950s before becoming a science fiction writer. The system most often described is an orbiting tungsten telephone pole with small fins and a computer in the back for guidance. The system described in the 2003 United States Air Force report was that of 20 foot long, 1 meter, 1 foot diameter, 30 meters, tungsten rods that are satellite controlled and have global strike capability with impact speeds of Mach 10. The time between deorbiting and impact would only be a few minutes, and depending on the orbits and positions in the orbits, the system would have a worldwide range. There is no requirement to deploy missiles, aircraft or other vehicles. Although the SOLT II, 1979, prohibited the deployment of orbital weapons of mass destruction, it did not prohibit the deployment of conventional weapons. The system is not prohibited by either the Outer Space Treaty or the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Some systems are quoted as having the yield of a small tactical nuclear bomb. In the early 1960s, an experimental nuclear reactor developed for the Army exploded in the Idaho desert, killing 3 technicians. Their bodies were so badly radiated they had to be buried in lead-lined coffins. The body of the man who most likely caused the prompt critical event wasn't found for quite some time. It wasn't until the emergency crews were able to look up at the roof of the containment building where the reactor exploded did they find him, impaled by the control rod, that he accidentally withdrew too far. Area 51 is an experimental airbase. The reason they guard it so closely isn't because of aliens, but rather that it's the place we test very sensitive aircraft and similar things that have the potential to change warfare to a fundamental level. The SR-71 was developed there and tested many times. We also tried to develop a flying saucer. There's a video that shows someone driving a floating circular disc that Hitler had also tried to develop. They didn't go through with it because the scientists decided that at the time would be wasted to try and make an actual high altitude one. They declassified this a good bit ago, but people are too focused on the alien aspect that they don't care. Personally, I think the government would go to these extremes for technology that allows us to spy on our enemies/allies almost undetected much faster than they would for a little green dude. My gran worked at Bletchley Park during WW2, deciphering messages including one that supposedly cut the war short by about 6 months. I know a lot of it is already known, but not much of actually declassified yet, and not half as interesting/fucked up as some of these, but they wouldn't even acknowledge she worked there until 6 years ago. Even then, it was just someone from the mod knocking on her door unannounced and handing her a medal. She died a few years ago and never really spoke of what she did there. TL. Dr. Gran worked with Engemer machines, we think.